Thank you very much, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you here today. Now, I reckon I'm a pretty lucky person, because in my job, I get to work with, what in my opinion anyway, are the most fascinating species there are. These species, they live and work together in extremely complex and close-knit communities. In so doing, they're also extremely sustainable. They're able to use every resource and every scrap of energy that's available to them. The waste of one becomes the resource of the next, and so forth. And this strategy of working together, combined with their extreme adaptability to their environment, has meant that they have become the most successful life form on this planet. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about bacteria. Without bacteria, there's no way we'd be sitting here today. For one, we'd have no oxygen to breathe. Pretty essential, of course. But what you might not know is that everyone here, every single one of us, is continuously carrying around approximately 2 kilograms of bacteria wherever they go. And please don't start looking for your disinfectant hand gel or anything, because trust me, you really want those bacteria to be there. These guys, they're helping you to get all the valuable stuff out of the food or the lunch you just ate. And they're also continuously helping your body to protect you from invasion by germs, which can make you ill. And, well, it's my belief, really, that, well, we need to start thinking and learning from bacteria. Because these guys, they're the masters of sustainable growth. And that's what we, us humans, are trying to achieve as we transition to a bio-based society. Just for the people who might not have heard about the bio-based society before, let me quickly explain to you, or try to paint you a picture, really, of what it's going to look like. The bio-based society no longer depends on oil, but on sustainable agriculture for all our needs, really. And it won't be competing with food production. And in the bio-based society, waste, which we now so casually really discard, will no longer exist. Waste will have become a resource for the bio-based society. So where are we now in this transition to the bio-based society? Well, if you start looking around you on a day-to-day basis, you'll see that there are many small and very innovative initiatives that are being made. 2 simple examples. You and I are now recycling over half of our household waste. We're separating it so it can be recycled rather than being dumped in a landfill and forgotten about. And I know it can be annoying to do, but it's worth doing anyway. The vegetables that we buy in supermarkets are starting to be packaged not in oil-based plastics, but in bio-based plastics. These can also be made to be biodegradable, and they're made from plant waste material, or perhaps even grass. But we're not quite there yet, because we still rely heavily on finite, non-renewable resources. There's the usual suspects, oil and gas, which we don't only use for fuel and energy, but also really to produce almost all our products that we consumers buy. For example, sir, that lovely suit you're wearing, made out of polyester, is it? Or perhaps the detergents we use to wash our clothes, or that plastic bottle of water you just bought, even though the Netherlands probably does have the best tap water in the world. It's more than likely that these have all been made out of oil-based materials. And don't think it's only oil and gas we need to consider. Take, for example, phosphate. Now, you might not know this, but phosphate is essential to all life. Every single organism on this planet depends on it. It's even in our DNA. And unlike oil and gas, there is no alternative. It's phosphate or nothing. And the phosphate we use, or need really, as a society, is mainly used to help our plants grow bigger and faster in agriculture. And almost all of the phosphate that we use comes from phosphate rock mines, which are only found in a couple of countries, such as China and Morocco being 2 important ones. And as a non-renewable resource, and as so often happens, we're using it up a lot faster than it can ever be made. And there are many discussions being held by very intelligent people about how long all these reserves and resources are going to last us. But I want to leave them to their discussions, because some of them say it's going to be just a couple of decades, we're going to run out in 10, 15 years, whereas others say they're going to last us for thousands of years yet. But to me, this isn't really the point. If phosphate is so essential to life, shouldn't we really be just transitioning to alternatives before all the resources actually do run out? And by now, I'm a bit worried you might be thinking, oh, this is going to be one of those really depressing talks and all about doom and gloom. And I really didn't want to do that. Because I'm here really to talk to you about one small way in which you, consumers, can really start changing the way we can transition to the biobased society. It's what I call, waste aversion. And what do I mean with waste aversion? Well, basically, waste aversion is a strategy we've evolved over thousands of years to protect ourselves from germs. We've learned to associate certain sights and smells with infectious disease and impending death. It's the yuck factor, if you will. It's why we associate a maggot infestation or a nice juicy pile of vomit with germs and disease. Luckily, we now know how to combat the most common risks of germs with basic hygiene, with waste collection and good food preparation, really. And in many parts of the country, this is still an enormous challenge. But in our Western society, we pretty much have it under control. Even so, our waste aversion has seemed to continue to evolve. It's even become hyperactive, if you will. We are so scared of germs that we can no longer really distinguish between what poses a real threat and what, in all likelihood, is completely harmless. And this was illustrated beautifully by an experiment performed by Rosin and his co-workers in 1986. Their 50 subjects, or test subjects, were given a glass of water with a cockroach in it and were asked to drink the water. They all knew that the cockroach had been sterilized and was completely harmless. Nobody could ever become ill by drinking the water. But still, there was only one person that would touch it, that would take a sip. The other 49 flatly refused. Even after this poor, harmless cockroach had been taken out of the glass of water, nobody would touch it. And this hyperactive waste aversion of ours is also why more and more of us are washing our hands with disinfectant soaps and cleaning our houses. I mean, it's not as if we're going to perform surgery on our kitchen table, is it? It just seems to go a bit far. And there's actually no evidence at all to suggest that all these disinfectant soaps are any more effective at preventing illnesses than washing with regular soap and water. And our environments are becoming, so hyper clean actually, that it's even being suggested that they're one of the reasons why modern Western diseases such as asthma and allergies are starting to increase dramatically. By now you must be wondering, what on earth has waste aversion got to do with the biobased society I was talking about earlier? Well, in a society where we have developed a hyperactive aversion to waste, how will we feel about living in a biobased society where waste no longer exists? Where will all the waste be going, and what will we be doing with it exactly? Well, this is where there's some bad news and where there's some good news, because the bad news is there's one source of waste we're not using enough of yet, and that's sewage. That's right, I'm talking about feces and urine. Ooh. The good news is, however, you won't have to be recycling it yourself. All you really have to do is just to let go of thousands of years of genetic evolution and accept the fact that your sewage is in fact a valuable resource, and a resource that fits beautifully within the biobased society. So hopefully now you're wondering, okay, so, what can you do with your pee and your poo? Well, Let me tell you. Well, one thing we could do is we could start using the cellulose fibers in the approximately 150,000 tons of toilet paper we flush down the toilet in the Netherlands every year. And with these fibers, we could make paper, of course, or we could insulate our houses. But we can even use these fibers to make a raw material with which we can make bio-based plastics. You could make plastic cups out of it, or the packaging for your vegetables, for example. But sewage is also a great source of fertilizers. It's full of potassium, phosphate, and nitrogen, and any gardeners out there should recognize the value of those elements. It has even been estimated that 20% of our global phosphate demand could be realized using only human excrement. And that's not including the manure from our livestock, because that would be a very good source as well. Well, what else can we do? Well, there's research being done to extract rare earth elements from our sewage. And with these, of course, we can carry on making our electrical gadgets like our smartphones and our laptops. Or we could grow algae on our sewage. And then we could harvest these algae, and they're a wonderful organism with which we can make all kinds of stuff, like oils or animal feed or even cosmetics. And we can make energy from our sewage as well. The sludge that's left after all the sewage has been treated can be eaten by bacteria, there they are again, and be turned into biogas. And this biogas we can use as a source of natural gas, or we could burn it for electricity and heat. And after all these valuable resources have been extracted from our sewage, we're left with water, lots and lots of water. And this water we can use to irrigate our crops, or we can use it in industry as processed water or as cooling water. And if purified sufficiently, we can even use it as drinking water. And don't go thinking this is never going to happen, because in fact, it already is. For example, do you remember the nuclear summit that was held in The Hague this March? Anybody living in The Hague will remember what a drama that was, trying to commute home after a busy day's work. But what you might not know was that during those days, the sewage that was produced was being used to regain phosphate. And it always makes me giggle just a little bit to think I might be fertilizing my garden with phosphate that originated from the pee of some of our world's most influential leaders. Little do they know. But probably the biggest problem we have is drinking the sewage, the treated sewage, I should say, after it has been purified. And it might surprise you to learn that in fact, in some ways, this is already happening too. Even in the Netherlands. Let's take, for example, the river Maas, which we all know, of course, us Rotterdammers. Apparently, in dry summers, 50% of the water flowing through the Maas is actually originates from the wastewater treatment plants that discharge their treated sewage into the river. Further downstream, the water in the river Maas is used as a source of drinking water. Of course, it's purified first, but in fact, to some degree, we are already drinking our treated sewage. And in some cities and countries, it's actually going a step further. For example, in Perth, Australia, they're making plans to put treated sewage into underground aquifers and use it really as a source of drinking water in case of a drought. But I think probably the leaders at this moment are in Singapore, where apparently 2% of the tap water is already treated sewage. And they all seem to be fine. Nobody's died of mysterious diseases as far as I know. And I think this is really good examples of how we could look at it. But unfortunately, there are also many such initiatives that have been sunk because of public outrage. People just refused to cooperate with initiatives where they would have to drink treated sewage. And this is basically all based on our hyperactive waste diversion, because the technology exists to purify our sewage water to such an amazing degree that it's actually better than the drinking water we already have. And I think this is really what I'm trying to say, is that we humans need to accept the fact that we are part of nature's cycles, and we really need to do our best to help nature to close these cycles. And that also means using waste as a resource and using waste that we don't really want to think about. So the question I really want to pose you, and what I want to ask you to do, is to let go of your thousands of years of genetic programming, start thinking more like bacteria, and ask yourself this: am I willing to drink treated sewage out of a plastic cup made of used loo paper? Thank you very much for your attention.